So I hope you had a good break. Welcome back for those joining us virtually. Thank you for coming back, and I hope you had a good quick 9-minute break. Appreciate your all's flexibility in our changes in our agenda. But I think the conversations have been really good, and I'm learning so much. So thank you again to all the panelists who shared. And we're going to move into our roundtable portion of today's agenda, and really thinking about what cultural burners, what California Native American tribes want to see the state grow and improve in. And we have a very exciting opportunity, as Secretary Crowfoot and Deputy Secretary Leslie Mayer walked us through this afternoon, is to compile a list of suggestions for getting out of the way of cultural practitioners and getting more cultural fire on the ground. And so that is going to be the main focus of tomorrow's event. But we wanted to provide a space for folks who are really focusing in on cultural fire to get some ideas flowing, get that brainstorming starting. And so to be able to add that to tomorrow's conversation. But also, if you all want to go somewhere else and talk about something else, we can do that too. So, but that is the hope, is really to kind of think through, how do we support you all and get out of your all's way to then get that cultural fire on the landscape. So a friendly kind of suggestion for the group, but again, we can go wherever you want. I was thinking we could spend the first 30 minutes just answering any questions folks might have, making sure everyone's up to speed on all the different components of cultural fire. And I might have to hand off to some experts here in the audience too. But then the second 30 minutes, really doing that brainstorming. But if folks in the room are like, we got it, we don't have any questions, let's get to the brainstorming, also happy to follow your all's lead on that. So maybe I will take a pause, and folks in the room, any questions for me, any of the panelists? All right, maybe we hand it to folks online, and my colleague, Deputy Director Megan Fleer, who's joining us online. Do we have any questions from our virtual?
There, can you?
Hi, Megan. We can see
yep.
you.
Good to see and hear you. And Fushan, hello to everyone in the room. I'm sorry I can't be there in person today. Yes, we did have a few questions that I am going to summarize and or paraphrase if that works.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and folks online, if I misrepresent your question, please do raise your hand and let me know. So the first question is, I think this was from the first panel. Historically, did it take tribal folks a lifetime to become a burn boss, or was there a coming of age ceremony for tribal youth to be able to set fires?
That is a very that's a very interesting question, and I think that, just to kind of jump in, every tribe's going to be different, and every cultural practice is going to be different in that education space. Just as a primer there, but I will look to any tribal leaders. Bill, yes. What are your thoughts on this question? Oh, sorry. Elaine is our mic runner. Thank you, Elaine. Appreciate you being here and helping with this. Bill?
Yeah, every tribe's going to be different, but like one person said, where are the youth in this? And I started at 4 years old, and by the time I was 8, I was burning by myself. And so we started our educations in baskets. We started in the womb, then we went to baskets, then we went to stories, to practice, to teaching ultimately. And so yeah, it's in our cultural traditions. You were taught at a very young age, and it started with establishment of the principles. So yeah.
At the family burns, we have mamas carrying babies in their front packs or backpacks, lighting the fire, and 3-year-olds with their aunties uh, lighting the fire. And as they get a little older, start teaching them, not start, but continue to teach them about, the safety and conditions like, oh, gee, it's windy today. Think we should light a fire? And of course, they know by, 7 or 8 that no, it's windy, don't light a fire. Or, ooh, look at all these dry leaves laying on the ground. We should burn them, I think. I'm like, no, it goes right over to the chicken house. And so they're aware of that the environment dictates when it is okay to burn and when not. So as Bill said, it is a lifetime of education, but they start young.
Thank you so much, Bill and Margot. Any other tribal leaders or cultural practitioners? Okay, hearing none. Megan, do we have any other questions from our?
Yeah, just a couple more. The next question is, how does one designate or certify a cultural burn practitioner?
That's a great question, and I know that both Bill and Sarah provided a little insight on that, how the Kruger tribe is looking at the designation of cultural fire practitioners. But I'm curious, any other tribes in the room? Any lessons learned, insights on how your tribe designates a cultural fire practitioner? Or Don? Oh, Chairman.
That's a question that I have is for myself as well, because, I was just mentioned that, do I designate myself now? But I mean, it's more than likely or more goes to the person that has the experience that's lived it through. And for me right now, for my tribe, I think I'm the person that has the most experience in it. So at an older age, yeah, I guess that would be me. So that's stuff we have to work out through and how it's done, who's going to do it. But I think that's where it's going to kind of end up for now. And then back to the question before too, as well, go back 200 years, 300 years, and those of you who've been parents, got kids, I mean, when they're young, they follow you around and watch what you did, right? They're sponges at that age and mimic what you did. So that's how it was. It was born, yes, in them through the blood and all for sure. But as they were able to walk and do, that's what they were taught, because, we didn't have all this that we have today. They were right there with the parents all the time. So they were learning, it was taught. And then eventually at a certain age, and you were able to do it on your own. And then it went on, and then your next generation started as well.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. And I think you pulled out kind of two components to that, right? There is cultural way of being. And I think, Bill, you also mentioned this, right? And cultural law. Then also now we have tribal law. And where do those connect, and how do tribal councils take on that difficult task of thinking through those intersections? So thank you for kind of highlighting that. I appreciate it, Chairman. And Sarah, I see that you might have something to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a nuance, and it's one of these complexities that I wish didn't exist, but does. Cultural fire practitioner is defined in state law for a couple of different reasons. So what I was talking about on the panel before was specifically for SB 310 agreements, which requires a tribal government to designate a cultural fire practitioner under the agreement. However, cultural fire practitioners are also included in SB 332, which is the law that relates to the state negligence standard that applies to suppression cost recovery by the state, as well as the claims fund, which provides access to cultural fire practitioners. In those two contexts, the definition of cultural fire practitioners is a little bit different. It's a person that's recognized by a California Native American tribe or tribal organization with substantial experience in burning to meet cultural goals or objectives. So that's a recognition that's different than a designation. And so I just want to highlight that for the different laws, we have different ways of identifying cultural fire practitioners. Again, it was not our intent to start that way. That's where we ended up. And so I think that recognition piece is a little bit looser. It doesn't necessarily require the kind of formal designation that we were talking about with respect to the SB 310 agreement, where I do think you're going to need some indication from the tribal council itself that this person has been designated. And that could again come in the form of a resolution or an ordinance or a mechanism that's tribal council says X person gets to designate or X elders committee gets to designate. So it can be flexible in terms of the way that it's done, but I do think it needs to be a formal act of tribal government.
Thank you, Sarah. And I know Don has some extra insights on this, so appreciate it. This is why it's good to have attorneys in the room to break down those nuances. So thank you.
Great. Yeah, I think, Sarah and Bill and Margo and I have all had conversations around this over the years, and particularly thinking about 332. When 332 first came out, there were a lot of people that came out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, I'm cultural burner," and it's like, well, the way that we wrote it was to really get to people who had extensive experience. And the idea of extensive experience in my mind meant experience across different ecosystems under different conditions for different reasons, and ultimately rooted in culture. You're a weaver, you're a hunter, a fisher, you're using fire as part of your lifeways. That I think sometimes like it's divorced now in some context. I agree, with the intent that a tribe should set those standards for themselves based on traditional law. I think that's a good starting point for it. Knowing that sometimes tribes don't have the capacity for that. A few years back when we were having these conversations, I drafted kind of what a certification process might look like that's tiered based on experience, your mentorship, and those kind of opportunities. And knowing that, on the panel, we had a conversation about the fire training centers, like Margo brought that up. It's like, what does it look like to bring tribal folks in and non-tribal partners to work in a space, and what's their familiarity around certain things like, like we have courses through the state fire marshal's office and NWCG. What does it look like if we develop something that's culture based for tribes that don't have the capacity to develop that? And so, these are things I'm thinking of. We have some things written out, but not necessarily ready to share just yet on that. So,
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather.
I'm going to shock everyone by speaking, but I just want to emphasize what I was saying earlier about really not being involved. So just for the template says the tribe will designate cultural fire practitioners through, and then it basically says insert description here. And that's all. That's it. That's the whole thing. So just want to make it clear that, yeah, while the specifics might be complicated at the tribal level for CNRA, you say we did a process and we say that sounds great.
Thanks, Heather.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts on designation of cultural fire practitioners? The complex space. Okay, Megan, I think you had one more question.
Yep, just one more. I think this might be a quicker one. So one of the virtual attendees asks, for the folks in the room, does anyone have any experience with cultural fires producing no or very little smoke? And excuse me, Hunter, if I misinterpret your question here. Is it a matter of the right conditions or a light breeze?
Okay, so this is kind of getting to the smoke component and knowing that cultural fire practitioners navigate that. And Don, all right. You're gonna be the first one.
I teach this to my classes too, right? So a lot of it comes down to, you're always going to have the same, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire. So there's always going to be smoke. What kind of smoke is it? How much is it? Really depends on timing, ignition patterns, a whole variety of different things. When I burn at my house, and like I talked about earlier, the cameras, it doesn't show up as a column most of the time. It shows up as a light fog over the forest. And my neighbors see this thing, you know, like I have absentee neighbors who live across the canyon, like a mile away, and they see it, and they're like, what is that over there? Like, what's going on over there, right? And they don't recognize it a lot of times, but then it's the burning, right? Because I'm not lighting bunches of areas on fire at once. I'm letting the fire work slowly across the land and create its own pattern in the landscape. So those kinds of things are really important. But then the materials that are burning, they may produce different colors of smoke. Like if you're burning in grasses that have a lot of silica in it, or if you're burning in tule, like it's usually a black colored smoke. And if you're burning in plants, you know, that have a lot of oils in them, they might be more black. Because I hear people often say, well, cultural fire should only have like white smoke. It's like, well, actually, no, it depends on what you're burning, and because that can be, you know, a factor too. So there's lots of different factors that go into it, but you're always going to have a little bit of smoke depending on how you burn.
Yeah, thanks for that insight. Bill?
Yeah, some of the burning, that we've been doing in late June, we have an interesting little microclimate in our area, so that doesn't work everywhere, but it's we have been putting out a series of purple air sensors, both indoor and outdoor, so we can see the time lags for home infiltrations and exposure and all pathways, all these things. And and this is part of the benefit of having an agreement, right? Or having not having a permit required, because there is a process for a variance with the air district. If you go straight to the permit, then you have to burn during the day, right? From all the language says, see submissions by 6 p.m. If you're burning the grass in late June, it's going to be dry. It's probably going to spot on you. The wind's probably going to be blowing towards houses. It exacerbates risk. It burns hotter, doesn't produce as much smoke. But if you wait until about 7 o'clock when the sun leaves, then all of a sudden fire behavior changes significantly. The smoke sticks around, but when you're actually looking at the AQI readings at the home level, you're really only getting 10-minute spikes at the 60, 80, 110 on the AQI. And so it's, in that place, in that time, it's safer. And if you put HEPA filtration in the house, you're mitigating effects to human health by having that filtered where the exposure is actually occurring to the people in the community. And it's really, you get more by cooking a steak in all reality. And so yeah.
Thank you. And I think both Don and Bill were sharing, like, this is what place-based expertise means, right? And how cultural practitioners know the materials that are going to be burning and know how much smoke that is or isn't going to produce. Or to Bill's point, we burn at different times of the day to mitigate that. So thank you both for a very tangible examples of what place-based traditional archaeological knowledge looks like for both of the regions that you're burning at. Megan, any other online questions?
If it's possible and there's time, I would just leave it open for the online attendees to raise their hand and unmute themselves. So it's not just me paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Any other questions for folks online? Oh, we have one.
Hi, my name's Kyle Tabor Cooper. I'm with the Washoe Environmental Protection Department. If you guys can hear me.
We can hear you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. One thing I asked, like, how do you designate someone or certify someone as a cultural burn practitioner? And one of the answers was life experience. So my question is it's often hard for tribal youth to speak with conviction of their qualifications and what they know, because knowledge is passed down, and it isn't our own knowledge. Culturally, youth aren't expected to speak up for themselves. It's usually elders are doing the speaking. how can one argue then for their own designation based off of life experience that is hard to quantify? I just wanted to ask for some of the people that might be cultural burn practitioners already, and like, what was your experience like getting that designation, or how was that for your designation? Because I see myself as a youth, like in the eyes of some of these people that have a lot of skin in the game, and like I'm already anticipating my argument for my designation with my tribe. It's like, um, how do I say I went to sweat lodges all my life, or I went, like, just that's my question.
Thank you for that question. And I know I am not qualified to answer any of that. So I'll hand it off to any tribal leaders or cultural practitioners who have gone through that process in your communities or with your tribal councils.
If I was in that situation today, I would, and in consideration of how we kind of framed our agreement structure, I would come to the table saying that been burning since I was 4 years old in these vegetation characteristics and this time of year, at this extent, for this long throughout my life. And if you've only lost one fire, you only lost one fire, but I'd never lost any. So that's kind of how I would start the conversation. But I think with the amount of mistrust that's out there and just outright fear that's out there about not only fire but liability, I think it's the liability piece is probably more important to address in all reality if you're looking for a formal tribal council designation. And other than that, there are a lot of prescribed fire training programs out there that are emerging, a lot of opportunities to engage in getting observed experience. And so that's one of the things we're talking about doing is establishing a process for observed experience to follow up on the stated background.
I just want to pull out one thing that Bill highlighted that I think is really important is it doesn't have to be a designation for all veg types all year round, all conditions. This is not anywhere in the law, but one of the things that we've been wrestling with is doing designations that are time limited, place limited, size limited. And so I think that should hopefully be a way that this can be kind of a stepwise process as people gain more experience.
I think those my question actually a lot. It is like it seems like this is kind of like a new idea of a designation. So like, I'm just trying to get any kind of like grip on that as I can. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Brandon.
In brief, what is the liability aspect of this? Because definitely that's going to be the first thing the council is going to ask.
Yes, and I think it's a big one and an important one. And Sarah's smiling because she knows I'm about to hand this off to her. But I think there's different components, right, to think through on that. And what we've tried to do here at the state is try to reduce those liability considerations. So we have the prescribed fire liability fund. It's a pilot, but I think it's a great space to think about how does the state of California show up and provide resources for folks who are burning but need that additional kind of liability support. And then we also have the negligence standard, right? And so and when it comes to recovery costs associated with prescribed fire, cultural fire, beneficial fire, right? It's that gross negligence standard, which is a legal frame of art, right? But I think it's important to acknowledge that that small escapes that are very, that don't meet that gross negligence standard are spaces where we can support and lead in. But Sarah, anything to correct, add?
It is such a hard question to answer, quote, in brief. I would say that there's a number of different aspects of liability to consider. I like to think about them kind of along the lines of the ones your council is probably thinking of, which are what happens if this gets out of control and burns down houses. And that's really where the claims fund comes into play. There's liability for, okay, what happens if we have to call CAL FIRE and they bring two, choppers out, and then we get a bill for, or we could get a bill for, tens of thousands of dollars. That's addressed by SB 332 and the gross negligence standard, where the likelihood of getting that bill is significantly reduced. And then there's what happens if participants in the burn are injured, or something happens to their property. And there's ways of handling that through waivers and other kind of legal frameworks. I would say, if interested in it further, I've done a couple of longer answer webinars on that are actually online, and I'd be happy to share them with you, or I'm happy to talk to folks. So
Thank you, Sarah. And I don't know if I hand it off to Heather or Chief Burlute. Anything else to add, or? Sorry to put you on the spot, but I just wanted to make sure you had the space.
Let me just jump in.
Okay.
Sorry,
Margaret, I didn't see that you had the mic.
As I think about asking our tribal council to recognize different members in the community as cultural burners, and what I would use to convince them is that there's certain people in our community that have been burning, and everybody knows they've been burning for cultural purposes for numerous years. And everybody knows that they are cultural practitioners, and that the tribe, by designating them or recognizing them, I should say, as cultural fire practitioners, would help them, because it allows them coverage under this liability claims fund, and it allows them coverage for the gross negligence fund. So it's in the tribe's best interest to do that for those people who are recognized as having the skills and the cultural connections.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So all great things that are been coming up for liability, and we've made a lot of progress in the last 3 years. One of the big ones that Sarah mentioned was the claims fund. And the only thing I would add to that is that there's a limited amount of requirements in the claims fund to fill out. It's about 10 minutes to fill out for practitioners. And the burn boss, or the burn bosses that's designated, are the ones that are eligible to apply for the claims fund, which include cultural burning, of course, NWCD type 1 and 2, and the CARX burn bosses. So those folks have the ability to be an applicant for their projects in the claims fund. It gives them $2 million worth of protection for damages. It's not insurance, but it does help support that next step, which is to get insurance, additional liability insurance, which the claims fund has opened the opportunity for. So it's getting better, but of course it is always a concern.
Thank you.
Question: are you saying that you have to be a burn boss to qualify? Or
And a cultural burner, you are considered a burn boss by
I'm not
definition.
talking about myself.
Yeah.
So a cultural burner doesn't have to be a burn boss to get
Correct.
that
But a cultural burner is considered a burn boss.
right. Okay, I get it.
To get into the claims fund.
Right.
So a landowner,
Yeah.
you're a landowner, you're not eligible to be in the claims fund. Unless you're a burn boss.
Right.
Or culture. Thank you so much, Lynn. I appreciate that. Yeah, Heather.
Yeah, I just going to the complexity that Sarah was talking about. I just want to make sure no one leaves here with a misunderstanding of what you get out of the CNRA agreement, so it doesn't automatically enroll you in the fund. You still have to do that. And again, I'm so sorry, laws are terrible.
But I'm glad to hear that it's a quick 10-minute application, and I wrote a note to myself to send you all this link after today's roundtable, so you all have that information. That should be in your box soon. Chief, did you have something?
No, the only
Okay.
thing I would add to that is just the reason why you do have to sign up, and Wendy can speak to this also, is because there's only. The reason why you do have to sign up for the claims fund is because there's only so much money in there. And so we want to make sure that there is enough money to protect all the projects that are registered in the fund. And so that's the reasoning behind that.
Thank you. I know it's always helpful for me to know So get it in, right? Get your projects in and have those protections. So, Chuck.
Speaking of claims funds, somebody in this room probably has the stats on how many, just escapement data, how many prescribed or cultural birds get out of control every year, how many of those result in property damage, how many of those result in mega fires. Having those stats easily available, especially for those of us that are trying to raise funds to perpetuate this kind of work, would be really nice.
Okay. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Chuck Strickland, the resources links.
Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah, they're available. The Forest Service has a ton of data on their burns. We have been trying to use the claims fund to collect data here that's California specific, and I'd be happy to share with you or anyone else.
Non-forest.
Yes, exactly. We know you're all. Are there any Forest Service people here? We know you're all safer than them.
One of the intentions of claims fund was to collect data because data collection was not great in California for when it came to prescribed fires and escapes. But so far so good. We've had no claims on the claims fund in almost 2 years. So that's great.
That's awesome to hear.
And so that's really good. And the amount of escapes the Forest Service claims, their statistic is typically 2% of prescribed fires escape. And of that 2%, less than 1% cause any kind of damage. So, and then that's like a fence line, or, there's some damage associated with the escaped fire, like a dozer line. Dozer goes through a fence, dozer goes through a driveway, that's damage. So, or it burns down a house, right? And then you have the mega fires, and those are even fewer and less frequent, and that's why they make so much news, right? That's New Mexico and others.
Thank you, Lynn. I really appreciate that. So that's about our 30-minute mark for questions. We can keep answering questions if that's what folks want to do, but I'm really curious to hear from you all. How do we improve this process? How do we reduce state barriers or provide funding and resources to get more cultural fire on the ground? And be very intentional. Like, I'm hoping that you all can bring the brainstorm that we're having here today tomorrow. Because we're going to have policymakers in the room tomorrow. We're going to have people who want to partner with your tribe in the room tomorrow, who are going to want to figure out those ways to reduce those barriers for cultural fire. And so hopefully we can take the next 30 minutes just to kind of brainstorm and then have that ready for the bigger conversation. Any initial thoughts on how do we make it easier for cultural fire?
So Bryce runs with Cal Fire. So one of the things we're looking at right now is I've had a lot of tribes that reach out to me and figure out how they can burn safely. So going through the process, we're looking at using our volunteer prevention. It's a program we've had in place with Cal Fire for a long time. It's basically making somebody an employee. We use them for defensible space, fire watch back in the day. So we're looking at that process. Signing them up through that, bringing them out there. And as I've talked to some of the different tribe members and, on this process is going forward, there's a couple other things I have to do more on with the Heritage Foundation, setting up intertribal commissions, and
those kind of things. But as I was talking to the folks, one of the first couple things are all, this is absolutely exciting. I can't wait to get the youth out there. And it was all adults asking me, and I'm all, uh-oh. I didn't think about that part of it. Because I'm trying to give some protection to my incident commanders as I bring what I was assuming was adults out there to do some of this stuff. I didn't, expect to have and as we've heard, the youth, can be 1, 2, 3-year-olds. So I'm like, all right, we have waivers for minors, and so there's some things we're gonna have to work through. But we have a system in place that I think will help improve some of the other places that do not have the experience of the panels that we're listening to today. So
Thank you for sharing that. And so you're kind of thinking that this volunteer prevention program might be a space for capacity building for burners. If you could just walk us through a little bit more on this program and why you're seeing tribes and tribal members wanting to utilize it.
yeah, no, I definitely think it'd be a place for building capacity. There's been the fractured knowledge, and they're trying to, and again, as every state person here has said, we can't teach cultural, but we can teach how to burn safely, techniques we use, patterns we use, why we do it, whether all those different things, so you can do it safely. And then I think as some of those members become more comfortable, they'll probably reach out and get some of that external knowledge from other individuals within this community, but building that capacity there. So I think that's one of the reasons, or one of the big benefits we'll have out of using that VIP program.
Awesome, thank you. I know that there was conversations around how do we get more training opportunities. So appreciate you highlighting that as a tool.
No, I would just add, it's just an opportunity for CAL FIRE to support cultural burning and practitioners, because we're already doing that with cultural practitioners coming to CAL FIRE to say, hey, we want some additional training, not just how to do cultural burning, but burning in general. And we are able to provide that support. And that's where the VIP program comes in. And that's where we're seeing the biggest bang for the buck there.
Nice. And I love how the shorthand's VIP. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And then also just want to highlight waivers for minors. That is something to explore. I know we have complex liability spaces, but we're hearing Chief Erlu's like, oh, what are you doing, Chief? But yeah, I think that's something to explore, right? And that's how we respect cultural practices. So I don't know if it's an easy answer. So
I think it's an easy answer.
yeah, no, it's definitely not an easy answer, but thanks for highlighting it. Yes.
To build on that, maybe there has to be a recognition of a reality that there is a mentoring element that's going on here. Like what the young man from Washoe was talking about is how can he be given recognition and standing by, in his mentoring process that he's going through. And so maybe in this work, we can kind of recognize that it has to be supported and create a space to deal with the liability issues. Like you're almost talking like a ride along kind of liability protection or we can kind of create a mentoring space that creates this kind of coverage. But also what everybody's talking about is we want to get more young people involved in this process, but we're not creating any space for them to do that. And so I would just kind of brainstorming that out a little bit. Like there are some frameworks or mechanisms that may kind of help us not have to reinvent the wheel on this. When you look in the public safety space, or how they kind of deal with bringing younger people into this space and mentoring them into these processes and building them up, into a profession or a career path or a life way in that way. So how could you recognize, could a young person like the young man at Washoe be given some type of mentoring, liability protection or coverage or status? And then, be able to use that for, getting standing in agency within his own community or in this process.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think not having to reinvent the wheel is, I think music to a lot of state employees' ears. So yeah, no, so exploring kind of the public safety space and how they navigate. Yeah, no, that's helpful. Did you want to take a second to just introduce yourself to everyone?
Right.
Yeah.
With the Indigenous Research Society, the old Sierra Fund.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
So, this issue with the youth engagement and is part of the reason why we've been trying to maintain a distinction between cultural burning and prescribed fire and prescribed fire cultural objectives. And so it ultimately, it's kind of it comes down to the action itself, right? It is like who is responsible for what, when, where, and why. And so we've been able to do prescribed fires with cultural objectives. One of the objectives as being a cultural burn demonstration with youth engagement. And the grade school brought a field trip in and took on the responsibility for the youth engagement. And anybody that had the agency qualifications and whatnot stood back while like a test fire. That's a cultural burn demonstration. But so it's a cultural burner that's doing it, not necessarily the agency person that's lighting it, right? And then at a certain point, you just, test fire successful, those folks back out, the prescribed fire professionals come in and conduct the work. And we've even done that in places where it's all surrounded by roads, you know what I mean? And so there are little workarounds that we've tested on that. We never had to test that in law, or in a court or a liability situation. Hopefully we don't ever have to. But yeah, when it comes to youth, people are almost more afraid of a kid getting hurt than a fire getting away. We had a BIA fire resiliency program officer look at a picture in one of our reports and say, "Oh, we're going to take all your funding forever." And we had to actually show them that, well, this is what it looks like from above. The picture might look shocking, but this is what it really looked like. And so then they kind of like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying now. It was perfectly safe, but you do have to be really careful about it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other kind of ways to advance culture? Oh, do you have something on you?
Not on youth.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Obviously, one of the reasons that we're here, that this issue exists, is because of the wholesale theft of land that occurred in California. The largest Indian reservation covered 12 square miles. Geneva, you and your staff have engaged in some of the most extraordinary work over the last year and a half through the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Program, returning land to tribes. I wrote one of those grants. I've been kind of helping usher it through the process. It's very painful. It's a lot of bureaucracy. It's very expensive. And I am of the opinion that California needs to build a California Land Back Agency. And with a budget that's tied to a funding source, whether it be a license plate fee or whatever, so that we don't have to wait at the back of the line at DGS for these projects to go through. So I think that would be, these projects need to be done faster, at larger scales, and more frequently, more tribes. And I think that would empower more tribes to be able to do a bill and Margaret were doing up on their lands in larger proportions of the state.
Thank you. Not only land back, but easier land back. Okay, got it. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And for folks who don't know what DGS is, it's Department of General Services, and they are one of our control agencies that do the review of and I'm blanking on the term. Appraisal. Thank you, appraisal. Appraisals and the kind of components that are needed for land acquisitions. And so thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that. And also Thanks for all of your hard work and that grant agreement. It's been a pleasure working with you on that. Any other suggestions for improvement?
I don't know about suggesting for improvement, but Reagan Terrace, so I'm a senior environmental scientist with CAL FIRE. I'm going to take that out for a second. And Wakasaki Chumney from Central California, so Sierra Nevada, cultural fire practitioner for my community. And, you know, most of my life, a lot of our ancestral territory is under the guise of Forest Service Parks. So as long as I can remember, my community has constantly engaged with those two agencies to try to get work done on the ground to support our community and our culture, our food sovereignty, access to medicine, and protect our Black Oak groves. And it is exhausting. And I've had the good fortune to stay and all the other things I've done. My partner and I bought a house on 30 acres, and that was a game changer for cultural burning for my family and my community, access to basket material, access to acorns, the just restoration process that we can do to bring an abundance of food, fiber, and medicine to the land, and have it be a safe space and a learning space to be able to share with community. So we're not federally recognized. So under SB 332, knowledge is cultural burner from my community. And what we do is mostly pretty small scale. And that's how I like to share with folks. We mostly work around basket material. And for me, growing up and driving around Forest Service roads, driving around mountain roads, trying to find some sourberry or some redbud that maybe got masticated the year before from the roadside and jumped down the edge of the road to try to get a few basket sticks versus burning a few piles of sourberry and redbud at my house and having 200 to 300 good basket sticks from this 4x4 patch of sourberry. That is a game changer for the transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next. And it is super simple and super approachable. And that never would have happened unless we had the good fortune to be able to buy this property. It never would have happened. I might be able to burn Forest Service property in the fall on my own time, right? Like, and that's a shot in the dark, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah. And so for me, I've had the good fortune, worked with Margo up in Northern California. Got to sit around and listen to Bill Tripp and other folks from the community talk and share their stories and see them push the envelope to get us here today. And same with Don and other folks. And for those learning, like, you just got to reach out because all of us are willing to share. When I burn at my place, it's open to anyone and everyone that wants to come learn. Because we're at this position, like Bryce was talking about, there's this want, there's this need, this desire for knowledge in our community, and how do we create this space for people to reach not so far back in their history and bring that knowledge forward, bring those stories forward, right? Like, I remember sitting at my great aunt's house and listening to them talk, oh, we really should burn this gulch, but we can't do it because you remember when what's his name got arrested and went to prison for however many years, right? And so, those stories are in all of our communities, and there's a lot of trauma there, and how do we overcome that? And then how do we move that forward, and what are we looking at as Indigenous communities throughout the state, throughout the world of, this revitalization of culture, food sovereignty, relationships with planet land, and then passing that on to future generations. I don't think I really answered any questions there.
No, that's okay. This is the part of the brainstorming, right? Like, let's get into it and let's think through this. Maybe if I can help kind of pull out some pieces that I think I've heard, and please correct me if I misstate anything, but I think the first thing I heard is land back, ancestral land return is a game changer. And I love how you phrase that, because that removes a lot of the hoops, a lot of the hurdles. Something else that I heard is, and maybe what I would ask my state government colleagues to kind of, let's put our thinking caps on, is how do we work with the federal government and see if there's ways that we can encourage the federal government to shift some of their practices to make it a little bit easier on those federal lands. Because we know that the biggest landowner in the state of California is the federal government. And we also know that it's through that theft of land why the federal government has all that land, right? And so how do we work closely with our federal colleagues to bring healing? Something else that I would encourage my state colleagues joining us for this conversation is, where are those state lands, and how do we open up that access, that co-management, that space for cultural fire, so the basket weavers can cultivate what they need and have access to those state lands as well. And then the last thing I kind of pull out for that, and doing this for the note takers so we can be ready for tomorrow as well, right? Is that burning is not just burning. You mentioned food sovereignty, you mentioned basketry materials, and there's that interconnectedness. And so I think we need to be isolated open. Anything to correct or add in my summary? Oh, okay, thank you. I really appreciate it. Margot, I think Margot's first, yeah.
So I have a couple of things that I would like to mention, and one is that I think that we need to do like a massive public education campaign about the benefits of fire and the fact that there is no smoke option, that prescribed and cultural burns prevent wildfire. So we are avoiding all that terrible smoke from wildfire by upping the pace and scale of cultural and prescribed burns. Another part of that is, as we up the pace and scale, there will be more smoke in the air from those purposeful use of fire. And so we need to have some sort of air purifier weatherization programs to help people who are smoke sensitive. And I'm thinking particularly of the low income people who can't afford to go out and buy that stuff on their own. And then finally, I just in terms of next generation, teaching them about fire, is that we are in the beginning stages of developing a junior firelighters program in partnership with the local school district and another Native nonprofit, and to actively let kids do like pre-burn surveys on little areas next to their school, and then they put in their own fire line on a small little area, and then post-burn surveys, and so that they actually are getting to be an active part of it.
Thank you.
I'm all distracted with all the cool things Margaret's doing. That's great. What I just wanted to add to Ray's stuff is that, CAL FIRE has a 14 state force, 15 now, 15. And so on those state force, we do have gathering agreements that we set up with tribes, and we have the ability to increase that. So if a tribe is interested in having some opportunity to gather resources on state forest, we invite that on the state forest. So we're open to that. We have the ability to do an agreement with them so that they could gather. We just need to sit down with them and ask them what they want and how they want to take it. And then we can work out the details. So no problem there. And it doesn't have to be federally recognized. It can be just a California tribe.
Nice, thank you. And I think that's,
all right. And I think we've also done some, we've started to do on the Jackson Demonstration Forest, some cultural burning with the tribes there as well. And so that's a opportunity also for us to partner on those lands. But that is very new to us. And so we would love the tribal engagement in that space. And so that definitely would love to open those conversations.
I was just gonna say, cultural burning, how do we get these projects out there? How do we get the word out there about this type of work? And I'm just keep coming back to the possible idea, like it'd be nice if the state of California would provide some type of micro grants so that there can be media projects developed, like, showing some of the work that tribes are doing on their land, kind of help spread the word, whether or not that might be in different forms, like a podcast or some of these different forms that tribes are utilizing. But I think it could be a huge opportunity for tribes to tell their own story.
That's a great idea. I really want that got my, I know Gita, Gita and I have already had some initial conversations, but that is great. Did you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, my name is Ricky Sanchez. I'm for the tribe and the emergency services director.
Awesome, thanks. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example of a non-ground disturbing investment, right? So sometimes we perceive what the requirements are based on the spaces within which we operate. And I think we're at a spot that we're starting to recognize that there are more people operating in more spaces that can maybe help overcome some of these sort of hurdles. A lot of times we think that policy reform or legal reforms are the only solution, when maybe it's a reframing of our consideration. That's the solution. It's not always the law itself, but it's the interpretation of an outdated intent that built the system upon which the regulation of policy is founded. And it doesn't take an act of Congress to change the policy. It doesn't change. You can revisit a rulemaking process or a regulatory process. And so there's, by reframing that consideration for a different intent, which is kind of seems like where we're at right now. And so I just wanted to throw that out there because, when we were going through a lot of the language with SB 332 and SB 310, we were like, well, what might this mean in the future? There's things in there that say landowner permission or tribal approval of burn. Does that have to mean that there has to, in all cases, be written landowner permission? And maybe not. And so those things are there. Those things can be looked at in different ways if we can start to learn how to look at things through the view of another person's space and really understand how we can make really positive changes together.
Thank you, Bill. And I appreciate that reminder that the executive branch can reflect on our regulations, right? And just for folks who are kind of thinking through like how the state works, right? Like you have the legislative branch that writes the statutes, and then the executive branch can promulgate regulations to provide further clarity of that statute. And that is something that many of our departments do for many different laws, right? And so that is a great reminder. And not to put you on the spot now, so definitely sleep on it, but I think it'd be really helpful for tomorrow to know which regulations you have your eyes on. Because in less than 30 days, we get to pitch that to the governor under this emergency order. And so we could really appreciate your insights on that.
I was really happy you started going down that, like the regulatory process and the legislature passes a law. There may or may not be policies and regulations that come from that law in every case. That there's a part of the Fish and Game Code that facilitate or that enables the Department of Fish and Wildlife to require fish passage below dams. There's no regulations associated with that. So it's very rarely, if ever, used because there's really no enforcement mechanism unless there's a regulation, unless there's a number that an enforcement officer can write on a ticket. And there's levies and fines and whatever associated with those. So it's really important to be thinking about, and policies are just kind of finger wagging authority. Essentially, there's no other than internal kind of HR kind of stuff. There's really no penalties for violating policy at the state level. It's really just the regulations. And so making sure that our communities kind of have, or at least the managers have some level of understanding of that process and kind of what matters, what doesn't, where you really want to focus your attention, your money, your lawyers. It's really important to understand this process.
Thank you. Those finger wagging policies. Any other thoughts on how we can make it a bit easier to get cultural fire on the ground?
I just want to say, as a basket weaver, I want to make sure that the basket weavers are being heard and that you all reach out to basket weavers in your community and listen to them.
Thanks, Elaine.
So I mentioned this on the webinar Monday, but I just want to mention it here again. I think that if we can really work on getting tribes throughout the state of California to and as well as other folks that are in support of advancing cultural fire, to really take a hard look at the potential things like these PG&E lawsuits, settlement agreements might be able to do for long-term operating capital at significant levels. Maybe engaging the Public Utilities Commission in a dialogue around some of the potential there, combined with some of the new authorities EPA has, to be able to take environmentally devastating events and put settlement funds towards some mitigating actions. And so there are things out there. One that I've been talking for years about has been the land grant institution endowment systems. The Moral Act created the authority for land grant institutions to create endowments to develop the workforce of the future. That's the intent, that's the purpose. One of the things that the land grant webinar series did not cover, it was mostly about land. And what it didn't cover was the endowment systems and educational institutions that were created with that funding, ultimately disenfranchise indigenous communities by requiring a professional workforce. And so whereas the National Forest Systems started with the Forest Guard, which a lot of times was a trusted voice in the indigenous community, was put into a guard station until such time there ended up being like a district ranger or someone to come in that had this professional certification, and they no longer had a job. And so so that is part of that disenfranchisement, that historical injustice story. Now that UC system endowment, 1% in 1 year could do over 110 full-time permanent positions forever. And or it could put 1,000 people to work for 6 weeks out of the year, every year, forever. Doing some good work. So I mean those are significant investments in developing the workforce of the future. And so I think that alternative funding pathways for perpetual action should be something we should discuss.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that and having like a tangible, here's a space to look, right? And the fact that we have laws in the book establishing these type of endowments. Again, it's something to I think for the state colleagues, here to really kind of put our thinking caps on and say like, okay, this is a space to open up those funds. Because I think that's been a very common theme is we need more fiscal resources to support cultural burners as well.
Yeah, Public Utilities Commission.
Yeah,
Another one.
CPC.
Insurance Commission.
The which one?
Insurance Commission.
Oh, Insurance Commission. Okay.
you know, a lot of folks like that could really be active in those spaces.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. So I know we are about 5 minutes over. I know that I'm feeling excited for this work. I'm feeling rejuvenated for this work, but also ready to relax and just connect informally. And I just want to say a huge thank you again for spending your afternoon with us today and having these conversations. We scheduled a happy hour at Sacred Hills, which is a tasting room and winery owned and operated by the Yosha BP Wintu Nation in Midtown Sacramento, and would invite you all to come join us for that happy hour, get some snacks, get some tasty wine, and then just be in a space to connect and continue these conversations if that's something that you're all interested in. And this happy hour has made possible, and also today's roundtable conversation has been made possible by the Resources Legacy Fund. So a huge thank you, Chuck, for your leadership in that space and really helping us bring everyone together for this important conversation. And also a huge thank you to the CNRA Fund, which, Brian, you have a new name actually. Indigenous Future Society. Thank you for your sponsorship and your help in bringing this all together. A huge thank you to Rebecca Allen, who has helped with so much organization and making this happen, and your point of contact for travel reimbursement funds. So please connect with Rebecca. And I also wanted to say a huge thank you to the CNRA team. There's so many folks here right now. Gita, Elaine, Olivia, Sky, Anne, Megan, Jessica, she's still here. Jessica has been a huge integral role in everything to get today up and running, and just a huge appreciation. You all put in countless hours to make this happen. And I just really appreciate everything that you do to make sure that the Tribal Affairs Unit can keep bringing not only these conversations, but advancing critical tribal affairs policies. So just want to thank you for everything that you're doing. Oh, and RSLA, I don't know if she's here, but RSLA has also been a great support to make today happen as well. And then I would be, I said Megan too, right? Megan, thanks for joining virtually. There's so many people to thank. And just really, I mean, that just shows how much of a team effort it takes to put together a roundtable. And so just a huge appreciation. And I would be remiss if I didn't do a quick plug for our request for consultation letters that are out. Appreciate your all's patience with my many emails on the space, but the California Natural Resources Agency is consulting on 2 topics that I think the tribes that are joining us here today might be interested in. The first one is we are updating our tribal consultation policy. We have an old one, it needs a refresh. And really to move towards early opt-in meaningful tribal consultation and away from that box checking exercise of we sent you a letter and we're done. All right. And so we've been working really hard these past 4 years to get those to update our internal processes to make sure we're doing that early opt-in meaningful consultation. And now it's time to lock it in and institutionalize it in the policy. And so we have that draft policy out. We also have a draft appendix to that policy that's around best practices. And we'll just really appreciate your all's time and expertise looking at that to see if you think it's going to work for your tribe and if you think it's going to help us move towards those meaningful tribal partnerships. And the second request for consultation letter that we have out is we are consulting on California's tribal harvest permit process and thinking through how those regulations in and around timber harvest can be strengthened and how they can be a space to support your tribe's priorities. And so if you're interested in that space, please feel free to reach out as well. I'd be very happy to consult with you on that process. So those are my 2 plugs. I have the letters up here as either of my interests for you. And then, yeah, I hope you all are still have enough energy to join us for our happy hour. Sacred Hills is a fun place and very excited to continue the conversations with you over a glass of wine. So your agenda should have the address to Seika Hills. But for folks who want to write it down, we're on 1733 S Street. That's Midtown. That's about what, 5-ish minutes, maybe a little bit longer. A drive from here. And we let the tasting room know that we're coming around 5:30. So, but we'll be there until 7:30. So please join us. And thank you again for spending your afternoon with us. And very excited about tomorrow's conversation as well. Hopefully you've already received the agenda. But if you want to take a peek at what that agenda looks like, I'll leave it right here. Take a look as well. All right, Wado, and thank you again, everyone.